Okay, let's get into this. When you picture someone on top of Mount Everest, you see that perfect moment, right? Ultimate achievement, pure happiness.
That for sure. But our sources, they paint a much darker and more complicated picture of what's really happening on the world's highest peak.
It's like the whole narrative we think we know gets flipped on its head.
Exactly. And that's our mission in this deep dive, to look at the history, the geology, and, the extreme risks. We're focusing on this really paradoxical lesson.
Which is,
The problem is never the ascent. It's always the descent.
and we see that play out so tragically in the 1996 disaster. The leader, Rob Hall, I mean, this guy was incredibly experienced.
Oh, absolutely. He'd summited 3 times before that, and still he perished. And it's key to understanding the danger. It wasn't the climb up that got him.
It was coming down.
It was the exhaustion, the exposure on that long, slow return. 3 people from that very team turned back early.
Why did they turn back?
They realized their oxygen was running low. They understood the time cost of the descent. And that judgment call, it saved their lives when the storm hit.
To really get why the descent is so deadly, you have to understand the mountain itself. I mean, geologically, this is a volatile place.
It is. It's a young place.
Yeah.
The Himalayas began forming, about 120 million years ago? That's when the Indian tectonic plate just slammed into Eurasia.
And that was the fastest tectonic drift in history, right? Something like 15 centimeters a year.
Insanely fast. And the mountain itself is still growing, so that height we all know, 8,848 meters, it's actually a moving target. The whole range rises about a centimeter every single year.
So we call it Everest, but the local cultures have a much deeper connection to it.
A much deeper one. To Nepalese, it's Sagamatha, which means goddess of the sky.
And for Tibetans?
They call it Chomolungma, or goddess of the earth. And for the Sherpa people, who've lived there for 500 years, the mountain is sacred. They perform puja rituals before every climb.
Asking for permission.
Asking for permission. And you definitely need it because once you cross 8,000 meters, you are in the death zone.
And that's not an exaggeration.
Not at all. The air pressure up there drops to just 1/3 of what it is at sea level, so you're getting only 1/3 of the oxygen.
And that causes these fatal conditions.
Yeah, things like high-altitude pulmonary edema, HAPE, where your lungs literally fill with fluid, or HAC, cerebral edema, where your brain swells.
And you just lose all cognitive function.
You become disoriented, you make fatal mistakes, and the reality up there is just, it's gruesome. It's led to this place climbers call the Rainbow Valley.
The name sounds beautiful, but the reality is chilling.
It is. The bright colors aren't flowers. They're the jackets and oxygen tanks of deceased climbers. Up to 300 bodies just frozen in place.
And they become these macabre landmarks.
They do, landmarks like Green Boots or Sleeping Beauty, and they stay there because recovering a single body is incredibly dangerous and expensive.
How expensive are we talking?
Nepal allocated 5 million rupees, which is around 37,000 US dollars, for just one recovery. And it takes a team of 12 men, huge amounts of supplies.
Okay, so given that cost, I mean, a permit alone is $25,000 to $30,000 and the physical risk, what is motivating someone to do this?
Well, there's the obvious economic driver for Nepal. It's a $300 million a year industry, but that's led to over-tourism and just a ton of waste, about 12 tons left behind.
But for the climber, what's the psychological pull?
The psychologist Andres Welt calls it the trophy.
The trophy.
Yes. Everest offers this clear, undeniable, measurable validation. For a moment, you were literally the highest person on Earth.
And that's easier to achieve than, say, being happy.
Welt's argument is that it's more concrete. How do you measure being loved or finding happiness? There's no 8,848-meter summit marker for that.
So because so many people over 6,000 now have done it, the goalposts just keep moving.
Exactly. People need to differentiate. So you get the first to summit without oxygen, the first blind climber. It's all to maintain that unique sense of validation.
So at the end of the day, Everest is just a story, a powerful one.
A story with a measurable goal and a very clear ending. Unlike life, which is, complex, subjective, and doesn't really have a finish line.
Which leaves you with a final thought. If tomorrow someone discovered a mountain that was just 1 meter higher than Everest, would this mountain instantly lose all its power, all its economic and psychological pull? And what does that say about why we climb in the first place?